Hello everyone, it's Maddie and welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are all having a lovely week. In today's case, we are going to be discussing a solved true crime case. Not only is the case that we are discussing today solved, but this case actually went on to solve 3 other murders. But before we get into it, I just want to put a disclaimer that I mean no disrespect to anybody that I talk about in this video. And on that note, let's jump straight into the case. Cara Robinson was born in September 1986 to parents Deborah and Ron. She was raised in Columbia, South Carolina and had 5 siblings. On Monday, June 24th, 2012, when Cara was 15 years old, she was at her friend's Heather's house. Heather's house was also in Columbia, South Carolina. Cara and her friend woke up in the morning and they decided that they wanted to go to the lake that day. Heather called her mum and asked if there was anything that needed to be done around the house before they left. Her mum just told the girls to make sure that they watered the flowers in the front yard before they left. Heather needed to take a shower, and so while Heather was showering, Cara decided to go out into the front yard and water the flowers. She was still in her pajamas at the time, which was just a t-shirt and some shorts. While in the front yard in broad daylight, a car drove past the house continuing down the street. Then Cara noticed it come back, driving up the street, before pulling into the driveway of the house she was at. A man stepped out of the car and he was wearing a button-down shirt that was tucked into his pants, and he also had a baseball cap on. He approached Cara with some magazines in his hand. He said that while he was driving past, he saw Cara outside and he stopped because he wanted to give her the magazines. He asked Cara if her parents were home and she explained that it wasn't her house. He then proceeded to ask if Heather's parents were home and she said that they weren't. The man then went on to say that he would give Cara the magazines so she could pass them on to Heather's parents. Cara agreed and said that she would leave them inside the house for them. The man then proceeded to step in really close to Cara and give her the magazines with his left hand, and then with his right hand, he pulled out a gun and held it to Cara's neck. He then grabbed Cara while still holding the gun to her neck and dragged her into his car. On the back seat of the car was a large storage box. He forced Cara to get inside the box, and so she got in, curling up to fit. He placed the lid back on top of the box but didn't properly secure it. During this time, while forcing Cara into the car, he didn't say anything to her. During these moments, Cara thought, "The minute the gun touched the side of my face, I knew. I'm a tiny 15-year-old girl. This is a grown man. I can't fight him off. So what is the next best thing?" Cara was a very intelligent 15-year-old girl, and she knew that she had to figure something out with the situation that she was put in. She straight away decided that the best action she could take was to try and memorize everything. And so she started to pay attention to every single little detail that she possibly could. She tried to figure out where they were going by counting how many turns the car was taking, and she even memorized the serial number on the inside of the box that she was in. At one point, after about 10 to 15 minutes of driving, the man pulled the car over and lifted the lid off the box. He spoke to Cara calmly and he told her that he was going to tie her up, gag her, and he proceeded to remind her that he had a gun on him. He then went on to restrain her wrists and ankles and also gagged her. He put the lid back on the box, this time securing it properly. He then drove for a few more minutes before parking the car. He then told Cara that he was going to get out of the car and then get her out of the car and that she wasn't allowed to scream. From inside the box, Cara could hear the sounds of people around and she thought that maybe she was at a gas station. She started to think that maybe this man was going to rob the gas station or something similar. She then felt the man lift up the container that she was in out of the car and put her down on the ground. He then proceeded to drag the container along the ground, and Cara could hear and feel the kind of surface she was being dragged on, and she could tell that it was concrete. She felt the box go up a little bit like it was going up a step, and then pulled along the floor and then heard a door shut, and before she knew it, she was in this man's apartment. Cara was left in the container in this man's apartment for a couple of minutes before he eventually took the lid off the box. He then proceeded to take the restraints off her wrists and ankles, as well as take the gag off her, but he reminded her that she wasn't allowed to scream, and then proceeded to remind her that he had a gun. The apartment that Cara was in was quite cluttered, and it even had small animals living in there, including lizards and fish. Cara continued to gather as much information as possible because she was committed to getting herself out. She really wanted to escape this man, and if she escaped, she wanted to be able to identify him. She noticed that there were magnets on his fridge which had names of dentists and doctors, so she memorized those. She also saw a hairbrush in the apartment which seemed to have woman's red hair through it. She also noticed that there was 2 toothbrushes, not 1, so she assumed that at least 2 people were living in the apartment. At the time, Kara was obviously terrified, but even though she was so scared, she still focused on doing her best to memorize everything in hopes that she could eventually identify her abductor. She managed to keep her emotions under control and tried to gain her captor's trust. The pair engaged in conversation, and Kara tried to act as interested as possible to try and get him to talk as much as possible so she could gather more information. She said that it sounds crazy, but while conversing, this man was actually really polite to her. He asked Kara some questions about herself, such as her name, whose house she was at when he took her, and if she had any previous sexual experiences. He asked her if she had a boyfriend, and he was writing all her answers down on a piece of paper. Can I just remind you guys that Kara was only 15 years old at the time? Like, that is so young, and she's such a strong-minded woman to be able to play along with her captor's game and keep her emotions under control in an attempt to eventually escape. At one point, she even swept the floors in his apartment to gain his trust. Unfortunately, Kara had to put 2 and 2 together that men like him don't just abduct little girls for no reason, and so she mentally prepared herself to be sexually assaulted by this man. Which is just so incredibly upsetting that at the age of just 15, Kara was preparing herself for a sexual assault. No one should ever have to go through that at the hands of another human. Unfortunately, Kara was raped multiple times over the next few hours by the man. The man did tell Kara that he would eventually let her go. He told her that after he let her go, it would be her decision if she would go to the police or not, but if she did go to the police, she would always be the girl who was raped. This did make Kara think that if she did escape, she would always have a stigma attached to her as the girl who was raped or the girl who was kidnapped. While in the apartment, the man also made Kara sit down with him and watch the news. He told her that they were going to watch it together to see if anybody missed her yet. At that point, Kara had only been abducted 8 hours prior, and so her story hadn't reached the media yet. As Kara wasn't on the news, the man proceeded to tell Kara that she obviously wasn't missed. He also told Kara that she was going to be staying in his apartment for a couple of days. At one point, the man actually put Kara back in the container. He told Kara that he had to make a phone call, and because she had been well behaved, he wasn't going to gag her this time when he put her in the box, but that she wasn't allowed to scream. He partially put the lid on the container this time. After all the trauma that Kara had already been put through up to this point and being put back in the container, Kara started to get a bit upset, and so she started to hyperventilate. While back in the container, she began to have a panic attack. The man obviously heard something going on, and so he came back into the room and asked Kara what was going on, and she said she couldn't breathe, and so the man proceeded to take the lid off the container for her and leave it open. He then left again and went back to his phone call. The man also made Kara smoke weed with him and also got her to take a Valium. He took her to bed and handcuffed her hands to the bed frame. He handcuffed her hands together and then had a rope that went around the bed frame which connected to the handcuffs with a clamp. While handcuffed to the bed frame, her hands were positioned at around face height. Her right leg was also restrained to the bottom of the bed frame. He then got into bed right next to Kara and told Kara that they were going to go to sleep. Kara did manage to fall asleep, presumably because of the substances that were in her system. Before the sun had come up at around dawn the next day, Kara woke up. She saw that the man was still asleep next to her, and so she knew if she wanted to escape, it was now or never. She saw an opportunity and she desperately wanted to escape, so she took it. She decided to try and undo her handcuffs, and so she tried to reach her fingers down to the clamp and undo it, but it wasn't working. She decided to use a different strategy, and as her handcuffs were holding her hands quite close to her face, she decided to use her teeth to try and undo the clamp. This time she was actually successful and she managed to get it undone. Her hands were still in the handcuffs, but her handcuffs were no longer attached to the bed frame. She managed to undo the restraint around her leg, and then she was completely free from any restraints to the bed. She knew that the next step was actually trying to get off the bed, without waking the man, and she did successfully manage to do this. She then, as quietly as possible, put her clothes back on and then tiptoed her way to the front door. She knew that as soon as she opened the front door, it was going to make a lot of noise and wake the man up. You could also see the front door from where the man was sleeping in his bed, so as soon as she woke him up, he was going to be able to see her escape. He had his gun right next to him, and she was really worried that he was going to wake up, see her escaping, grab his gun, and shoot her through the window. She said, "I know he has the gun right beside him, and he's going to see me running, and he's going to shoot me in the back. That's all I could think." But she decided she was going to open the front door anyway, telling herself, "Okay, we're just about business, we're doing this." Kara opened the front door as fast as she possibly could and started running for her life. 18 hours after Kara was abducted, she was finally free again. She ran into the parking lot looking around and she saw that a car was driving, so she ran in front of it and started waving her hands around. Inside the car were two men and she told them that she had just escaped an abduction, and at the time she still had the handcuffs around her wrists. She turned around and pointed to the house that she had just escaped from and told the men to remember that house. Kara asked the men to take her to the police station, and so they did straight away. Once at the police station, Kara spoke to an officer, but she felt that the officer didn't really believe what she was saying, even though she still had the handcuffs attached to her wrist. This made Kara feel absolutely awful, as she just escaped this traumatic experience, which is what she set out to do as soon as she got abducted, and then she goes into the police station, finally escaping and telling them her story, and then she just felt that they didn't really believe her. The officer phoned Kara's mum and told her that they had Kara, and they also told Kara that they were going to take her to the hospital, but before doing so, they told her that they had to take her back to the apartment complex so she could try and identify the house that she escaped from. Kara reminded the officers that she did tell the two guys that drove her to the police station which house it was, but the police said that they were in a bit of shock and they didn't know if they could identify the house properly. So Kara did return to the apartment complex with the officers, but she wasn't able to identify the house straight away. However, there was a staff member of the apartment complex there, and so they approached him. They told this staff member as many details as possible that Kara had remembered about her abductor, and this staff member knew exactly who they were describing and were able to take them to the apartment. Authorities went straight to the apartment, but Kara's abductor was nowhere to be seen. Authorities then were able to get a search warrant and they went through the whole apartment. In the apartment, they found newspaper clippings of unsolved murders of young girls. The Richland County Sheriff has since said, "I don't care how tough you are as a cop. When you see something like that, it grabs you." At that point, bells really went off in our heads that we didn't just have a kidnapping of Kara Robinson, this was something else, an actual serial killer. Officers continued to search the apartment and take as much evidence as possible. The apartment belonged to a man named Richard Ivonitz. Investigators spent the next few days working to track down Richard, who had fled to Florida. On June 27, 2002, 3 days after abducting Kara, investigators managed to find Richard's exact location and a high-speed chase unfolded. At one point on the highway, Richard came to a halt, and at the time he had a gun in his possession. He wasn't listening to police commands, and so one of the officers sent a police dog off towards his car. Richard then grabbed his gun and shot himself in the head, and he died at the scene. When Kara found out that Richard had ended his own life, this made her really angry. She wanted to go to court and testify against Richard because she wanted him to see her across the courtroom and know that the day that he decided to abduct Kara, he really messed up by choosing her. She wanted him to know that she was a smart, intelligent, and strong woman and that she won. Kara described Richard as calm, calculated, and prepared during the 18 hours that she unwillingly spent with him. When she found out about Richard's disturbing past, she wasn't surprised by it. But who even was Richard Ivonitz? Little is known about his personal life, but let's delve into what we do know. Richard Mark Ivonitz was born on July 29, 1963 in Columbia, South Carolina. Throughout his life, he had been married twice to much younger wives. Some of the jobs that he had had in his past that we know about was he was a manager at an automotive company, and he also served in the United States Navy as a sonar technician. In 1987, he exposed himself to a 15-year-old girl. 1 month after the incident, he was arrested and sentenced to 3 years on probation. He was suspected of 2 rapes in 1994 and 1995, but was never convicted of these. After Kara managed to escape from Richard's apartment, it was discovered that he was responsible for the murder of 3 young girls. Their bodies had previously been discovered, but their case went cold. No one had any idea who was responsible for their murders until Kara escaped Richard in 2002, exposing his previous crimes. Police not only found the newspaper clippings that I mentioned before, but they also found forensic evidence in his apartment when they were searching it that linked him to these murders. Sophia Silva was kidnapped by Richard on September 9th, 1996. He abducted Sophia from the front steps of her home in Virginia. Sophia was just 16 years old at the time, and a month after she was taken, her lifeless body was found in a creek. The fibers on the handcuffs that Richard put on Kara were linked to the fibers found on Sophia's body. Then on the 1st of May 1997, Richard abducted sisters Kristen and Katie Lisk from their home. Kristen was 15 at the time and Katie was just 12 years old. 5 days later, their bodies were found in a river. The fibers from the handcuffs that Richard had used on Kara were also found on the sisters' bodies. Kristen's palm and fingerprints were also found on the inside of the boot on Richard's car. Richard was 38 years old when he abducted Kara. At the time, his wife and his mother had gone on a trip to Disney World together and had no idea of what Richard was doing back home. Richard was a serial killer, and people do question if Richard maybe committed other murders that he just hasn't been linked to. Officers have no doubt that if Kara hadn't managed to escape Richard's apartment, that he would have murdered her too. And now let's touch on what happened to Kara after her escape. Kara went on to receive $150,000 in reward money for her role in solving the murders of Sophia, Kristen, and Katie. She was also able to meet the 3 girls' families. She said, "It was one of the most important things that's ever happened to me because it brought home the importance of what I did. Because I felt like, wow, I'm actually giving these families something that they never would have gotten without me. Just the closure of knowing that the person responsible for their daughter's death is no longer here." Kara also went on to establish a strong relationship with the sheriff that handled her case, and his name was Leon Lott. He treated Kara like a family member, having daughters himself, and he looked after her. This led her into her role with law enforcement. Kara was looking for a job over the summer, and Leon told her that if she wanted, she could work at the sheriff's department. She took him up on this offer and started doing a little bit of admin work. She also continued to work there throughout college while she was studying to become a teacher. She loved working at the sheriff's office, but she also wanted to become a teacher, and so she decided that she was going to find a way to bring these 2 professions together. In doing this, she became a school resource officer. When she was at the police academy, she didn't tell anyone that she was actually the Kara Robinson who had escaped a serial killer. But one day, out of pure chance, the instructor actually focused the lesson on Kara's specific case. She went through the details of Kara's case and even showed the 3 girls who were murdered by Richard on a slideshow. Kara sat through the lesson, and then at the end, she went up to the teacher and pulled her aside and told her that she was actually the Kara that she'd been talking about during her lesson. The teacher was obviously shocked and later went on to tell other staff in the academy. As a result, Kara was given an award for courage and bravery at the academy when she graduated. Kara has since spent quite a bit of time talking about her disappearance to all different groups around the US. In 2009, Kara appeared on an American TV show where she took part in an interview. She was interviewed by Elizabeth Smart, who also escaped her abductor. During this interview, she was also interviewed alongside 5 other survivors of kidnappings. She has since made the following statement about that interview. "I sat down on a couch with Elizabeth and 5 other women who had survived kidnappings and sexual assaults. And that was the moment that I realized that I really had a bigger purpose. I knew that I could find a reason for what happened. And I always knew that what happened to me was something that happened so that I could help other people." She went on to say, "I was healed on that couch, sitting there talking to those women in a way that I didn't even realize I was hurting. Just to sit down and talk to women who really understood the heart of what I had been through." After this interview, Kara was inspired to continue to talk about her experience. Kara decided to work on a documentary called Escaping Captivity, the Kara Robinson Story, which goes through the details of Kara's abduction. In February this year, 2023, a movie was also released called The Girl Who Escaped, the Kara Robinson story, which goes for about an hour and a half. Kara is now married, and so her name is Kara Robinson Chamberlain, and she has 2 sons. Kara never wants to be known as a victim, she only wants to be a survivor. Kara said, "I think to say you're a victim, then someone took something from you. Nothing was taken from me. I refuse to give that man that power. I will say that I am who I am because of what happened to me, but it did not make me who I am." Kara now also has a TikTok page where she posts details of her story as well as advice on dealing with trauma. And that is all the information that I have on this case. Kara is such a strong-minded person who has so much to live for. I would recommend going and following her TikTok as well as watching the documentary and the movie on her story. I look forward to discussing this case with you guys down in the comments, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye guys!